Syntactically awesome style sheets. SASS. SASS is a language that gives you superpowers to write CSS. So in other words, if you set out to create a modern UI with CSS, you will repeat lot of code in your CSS. SASS comes to the rescue to solve this problem. SASS provides a compiler to compile a completely different language into CSS. You could write SASS in two different file formats, SASS and SCSS. SASS kind of old format where we avoid braces and semicolons to write CSS, but mostly the famous file format is SCSS. So through this tutorial we're going to use SCSS. There are different ways to set up the SASS compiler in your local. One is setting up through Node and the other one is setting up through a plugin of VSCode. So for this tutorial we're going to see the plugin setup. First you need to install the VSCode. So you can type in VSCode like this, Visual Studio Code download in the Google, and you can go to the code.visualstudio.com and download the appropriate version for your operating system. I've already downloaded the Mac version. I've already installed it. So let's just skip to the part where I open my VSCode. So here is my VSCode, and first you need to set up two plugins. One is live server. You need to install this plugin and also the live SASS compiler. Once you are installed and ready, you can go to a file section and create a folder and create a SASS file like this. I just tidy up my desktop. So here is an empty file. So let me write some CSS in it. Normal CSS. I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm just creating a class. So as I said earlier, any valid CSS is also a valid SCSS. So I'm writing a valid CSS now. Save. So as soon as I saved this, the CSS compiler is watching the files. So if it is not watching, you would see a button like this and you need to click that. So as soon as you click that, it keeps watching the changes for these SCSS files in the folder and keeps compiling them into CSS. So the compiler takes care of the job to convert your SCSS into CSS. So basically the killer feature of SCSS is the variables. So what is variable? Variable is something that you create a placeholder, you create a container for your value, like something like this, background, and you will set a value to it like blue, and wherever you go in SCSS, whatever the style you create, you actually use that variable. And if I'm using it 10 times, so I'm not repeating the value blue everywhere, but I'm repeating the background color here. The variable, I'm just replacing the value with variable. So basically what is happening, the value is actually kind of contained in this namespace, and I use this name wherever I want the blue color to appear. And as soon as I save this, the compiler actually compiled the SCSS into SCSS, and if you look at the CSS, you will see the blue everywhere. So in future, if you didn't like blue or your client asked you to change it to orange, you could literally change like this in one place, and all the number of instances that you used, wherever you used, if I save this SASS, you will see that color created, updated. The next question we want to answer is, how do I use this CSS file? So simply I can create an index file here like this, index.html, HTML5, and I can link the document. So I'll say main.css. So even if this file is not here, what happens if I go ahead and make some change here and save it? The file is going to come and compiled and placed here. I can refer the CSS here in my HTML document, and I'll have this file once it is compiled. So yeah, now we have the setup. Let us also open this index file on the left hand side with the help of live server. Live server basically refreshes the HTML page as soon as I save something. Something like this. So I don't have to come here and hit the refresh button on the Chrome page. So as soon as I save this document, it's actually auto refreshes and shows me the changes. So that's how we use live server. So yeah, we have this setup in here. Now I don't have to open the CSS to write CSS. I can directly write it in SCSS file and that get compiled into main.css, and I've already linked that main.css in HTML. So whatever I write in SCSS, that's gonna reflect in the index. So let me forget this file for a while. So I have this my class. So I created this paragraph and class, my class. Now written some. So as you could see, so I go to a CSS file and I change the color to blue. Again, save it. The CSS compiled with the help of CSS compiler, and the CSS updated, and the index file got updated CSS, and I've got the updated style in the HTML. So that's how the whole cycle is gonna be. Let me create some structure to demonstrate further features of SCSS. So let me take a container. So if I save it, I'm gonna see a structure like this. I just want the hi Ganesh here to be occupy half of the space, and hello world should be occupy half of the space. So how can I do that? So yes, you could use display flex and make them flex items to align here, and then you center align this guy and you center align this guy. So yeah, strategy is good. Let's get done with SCSS. So SCSS next killer feature is nesting. So nesting is looks something like this. So if you wanted to refer to the left panel inside the container in your CSS, you probably do like this style. So dot container and then dot left panel. So this is how you need to write classes for these left and right panels. But with SCSS, it's not the case. You're not going to use this model. SCSS allows you to write the nested mode. So you can first create a class for container and create another class inside the container. So if I say display flex refresh, these two guys are now side by side, and I'll say left panel flex 1 and right panel flex 1. Now these guys took half and half space, but I want this guy to center, so I could say display flex justify content center, and the same to this. I need to say display flex or this guy. Let me add some background color to this guy. Background color. So let me create a variable that is container background. So remember the syntax, $, separate each word with a hyphen, all smalls. So let's say red. So I'll use this as an error, I know, because I made an error. So it gives me a pretty good error compilation also, because if I messed up my CSS, it's gonna give me the warning, the error, that where did I mess up. And so it's nice to have a compiler like this to avoid mistakes. So yeah, I have the red color for my container, and I just define now. If you see, the styles have applied. So how is this nested CSS compiled to? So a container, inside container there is a left panel and there is a right panel. This is how the CSS got compiled. In case if you are wondering that these are something that you haven't written and still populated, so SCSS takes care of browser compatibility as well. So these are the properties that are compatible with the specific browser. So the property that you have written, and SCSS takes care about adding few more properties that are compatible with different browser versions. So if you could see here, these three lines are mostly similar. So can you move it to a different location, a common location, and reuse? Yes, you can do that in Mixin. So let me move this three lines into a single Mixin. So this is a syntax of a Mixin. You should @Mixin, and you should name the Mixin. So the Mixin name is flex and center, because these three lines are meant to like flex and center and apply some background color. So it's okay. Let me move these three lines and remove these three lines here, and I can say include @include flex and center, and also here. So as soon as I save these things, now with these three lines now shared. So if I can go to CSS, I can see the lines have been copied into both the CSS, but the only problem is here that both of the flex items have actually same color. So I can actually modify that. I can send in a property like this, bg color, and I can send it from here. So instead of using primary, I can use this variable here. For this variable, to replace this variable, I can send the primary and secondary color from here. So let me do that. Basically what is happening here is I'm sending in the primary color and secondary color to replace the bg color, and based upon which parameter I send to this Mixin, that color will be rendering in the respective location. So if I save this, as you can see, primary and secondary color, I use those three lines with this parameter in place. With the help of this parameter, I just customize the color to change. For this instance, I used primary, and for this instance, I use secondary. There are certain flow controls in Mixin also. So you could, for suppose, if you wanted to create a box, whether to have a bug, a rounded corner or not to have rounded corner, you can create such kind. You can actually set up those kind of conditions. Let me write a Mixin for that. Mixin avatar. So I'm trying to add an avatar class. So here I'm actually saying size, width, size, and height is also should be the size. So if I pass in 100 pixels to it, it will create a 100 by 100 width. So if if the expression, so if rounded is set to true, then it will apply the inner one. So if say border, radius, size by 2. So if you need a rounded corner one, so if you send this rounded to true, it will actually, this condition will become true, and this property will be added to the class. If not, by default it will be false. So this is what I'm saying. So let me add some classes. So out here in the container, I would say box avatar, and I will say at include avatar mixture, and the size is 100 pixels and false, rounded to false, rounded to. And if I want a circular one, if I want a circular one, then I can set this property to true, and I will get those classes. So if I go back to CSS, if I wanted to find these out, I will have, so I have an issue there. Okay, so no Mixin. So this is kind of should be before this code block. So it was saying the no Mixin available after that. So now I have generated, and you could see box avatar 100 pixels, 100 pixels, and if condition is satisfied for circle avatar, and it's added border 50 pixels. So at each is something it iterates on certain values. Like if I have a set like this, like paddings, and say I have 5, 10, 20, 30. This is my number set. Now if I iterate on this set at each padding, $padding, I'm actually creating a new padding. So each $padding in paddings. So each time it picks up one element and executes for the rest of the elements. So at this point of time, I can generate as many classes as I want with these paddings. So I can say p hyphen. So this is an interpolation in SCSS. So I can actually print this value here within this braces, dollar and braces, sorry, pound and braces, and I can, and for the first time, if it is going through 5, so this will become p hyphen 5. Second time, second iteration, it will become p hyphen 10, 20 and 30 same way. So I can say padding dollar padding, not paddings, padding. That means this item. So if I save this, so I will see number of classes generated like p5, padding 5, padding 10, padding 20, padding 30. But this unit is not actually a valid unit because it should be in pixels or rems or whatever it is. So I can simply put a plus and px, and that will actually render 5 pixels, 10 pixels, 20 pixels, and 30 pixels. So this is another flow control. So the next flow control is for $i from 1 through 3. So that means it will run for 3 times, 1, 2, 3, from 1 to 3. Each time it runs, the I value will become the iteration value. So I will be the number of that particular iteration. So if I wanted to, if this is running for three times, I can generate 3 different classes. So I can say li of nth child. So nth child is a pseudo class. The pseudo class selects one particular element of that particular number. So I can say pound, and I can say put $i. That means first iteration it will be 1, second iteration it will be 2, and third iteration it will be 3. So I'm actually writing a background color. So I can write a background color, like let's say I have taken a green color. So now I can use another function called lighten, a method called lighten. So what happens is that this lighten method will lighten the color that I have given here. This variable, this will lighten a color to a certain %. So here I said lighten the green to a certain %. So if it is for the first time, the I is 1, right? So 1 into 5 is 5. So for the first item, green color will lighten 5%. Second iteration, this will become 2, and it will be 2 into 5, 10% lighten. And third iteration, it is 3 into 5, 15%. So if I save this, I can see 3 different classes. Nth child of 1 is this color, 2 little lighten, 3 little lighten. If I have a better darker color, you will see the difference here itself. So let me pick a better darker version of the green and save it, and now I can see, now you can spot the difference here. So it's actually kind of lightened. So we can see the demo also. So here you will li, if I save it, you could see the lighten happening. So D green, a little bit lighter green, little bit lighter green. In the nested elements, there is one another subject that I should mention, is that descendant or pseudo selector additions in the nested element. So I can add ampersand and put a pseudo class there and directly add, and I can put some styles that needs to be rendered there. So background color, and I can say secondary, and if I save it, sorry, this is primary. If I put it primary, so if I hover this, the style is changing. That means for the same right panel, for the hover pseudo selector, I'm changing the color, opposite color. I use the primary color, secondary color for the background, and I'm changing the primary color for on hover. If you wanted to see the style that is generated for hover, I think if you put a ampersand and put the pseudo selector, that is going to generate a style like this. Okay, for the right panel, the background color is this, and the hover, the background color is to change it to this. Thank you guys. Please do subscribe and comment on what you think of this video and help me improve.